invitation, Mr. Venki. I mean, we're really honored here. I'll probably start, what kind of attracted me first, Venki, a marathoner and an avid reader, and someone who loves traveling and traveled across the globe and lived across almost 8 cities across India in 25 years, which he counts as his priceless experience of living, traveling amidst varied cultures and people. And very, very happy to have you here, Venki. A chemical engineer from Anna University, Chennai, and done his PGDMM from Times School of Marketing, Delhi, and also completed executive management programs from Tepper School of Management, Carnegie Mellon University, and IIM Ahmedabad. And of course, is a proud recipient of the Fulbright Scholarship awarded by Board of Education and Cultural Affairs, USA. Just to come on the professional side, we all know, fondly call him as Venki. Currently serves CavinKare as CEO and Director. And of course, in addition to driving the growth directly, building a strong leadership team for the various business and so on, he also serves as a director on the board of the CavinKare Group. And the group operates across FMCG and retail verticals. With over 26 years of experience, Venki joined CavinKare in April 2018 after an exciting leadership stint of almost 20 years in telecom industry. So kind of comes across with multiple industry experience. Prior to joining CavinKare, Venki was with Airtel, a long time in Airtel. In fact, Venki has served in very varied roles across strategy operations. And early on his career, he was with Reliance Industries, Escotel Mobile Communications. He has an active interest in the startup ecosystem as well, and has been making small angel investments and mentoring new economy startups, made investments in 7 to 10 startups so far. He's an advisor on the board of one of the management programs offered by TAPME. And here we are today, it's like a very tough time, with lot of changes that is happening around us. And here to share his wisdom on what it takes on the leadership side. So over to you back. Vijay, do you want to give a quick introduction about today's session? And then before we hand it over to Venki?
Sure, yeah. Sure. Thank you, Rajeshri, for this great introduction. And just as a context on what we are going to talk about is more like, there is no words to say this one. We are in a very, very interesting landscape. They say, there is never a dull moment. Look at Ukraine-Russia war, that's on one side. And there are dimensions of alignment of nations that are happening around this war itself. Then there are some situations in China that is happening. And more on that, there is a disruption of supply chain that is happening in the world. Then there is a washout in financial markets. FIIs are withdrawing. The rupee is depreciating. So a lot of things are happening. And on top of it, we are also getting something about COVID also. What we thought as COVID is behind us, now it looks like we might be looking for a wave. That's how it looks like. We'll see where it lands. So there's a lot of things happening here. So what we were thinking is that try to get some feel in terms of, what does all these things mean to the business leader who is running a business, and just to explore on what is happening and how the challenges are being managed and what leadership challenges are coming in the way. So these are the things that we are going to explore today. So Venki, first of all, thank you very much for accepting our invite and being here. It's really related to have you here. Now, we talked about the changing landscape, Venki, now on the macro and the micro level also. So when you look at the macro and the micro level of things that is happening, what does this mean to you as running a business?
First of all, I hope I'm not preaching the preachers. So let me take the liberty of sharing some of the experiences we have and obviously things that we can over a period of time interact as well. Like you said, I think these are the last 2 years in particular have been very uncertain times. Have been uncertain times in the past, but I think the last 2 years have been very defining years, and this year seems to be sort of carrying forward the sort of hardship from there. See, when you step back and look at it, I think there are two big things that I would pick up, right? Economy aside, the financials of the economy aside, that I think is a different discussion that probably we need to sort of get into. But I think at a very broad level, if you look at two things that very clearly stand out, two to three things that very clearly stand out at a leadership level, is one, I think, is you can never take things for granted. I think the last 2 years, what it has taught us very clearly is there's nothing that you can take for granted, right? When I say that with all humility, because what COVID did to us was sort of a complete overturning of what you thought was business all about, and you had to sort of get on back to the track from ground zero, right? So one big thing that I see with all these big issues that are happening today, big challenges that are happening, whether you call it as COVID, whether you call it around the localization that is happening largely across countries today as a theme, when you look at some of the issues around international warfare and other stuff, one thing that's very clear is you can't take things for granted. And what it means basically is a plan B as a macro strategy is actually a big debate that's happening across boardrooms today in my mind. In particular, I think we've gone through this very significantly, be it in the supply chain side, be it in the way access to the markets have opened up, or be it in the way that you had to sort of shift gears in between. You can't take things for granted. And I think while this was always there as a concept, I think it's been far more very clearly, personally and professionally, I think it's been far more amplified in the last 2 years, right? And therefore, I think the fallout of that is that you always have to have a plan B. And a plan B that's in line with what you think you want to do, but you will have to think through that piece and keep it ready so that a response is given at the right time, right? COVID literally ripped us apart where you had to, I mean, I remember, I think March 20 or so, the 2 years back, you suddenly had to stop everything and then go back to zero to say, and many industries could not even start back the factories. And also we were in an industry where probably essentials were a part of life and we could continue somehow. But even within our group activities, we had at least 4 or 5 businesses which just stopped overnight. And then you had to take care of people. You needed to know when to start with, what else can be done. So I think a plan B, the necessity of a plan B, I think at a very macro level is quite clearly amplified today, right? The second thing that I would say is the criticality of people, right? And I think nothing other than these challenges can throw out the fact that people are becoming very important today. And it is a challenge today at a macro level because retention of people equally is a challenge. But without people, I think some of these challenges, surmounting some of these challenges are becoming much, much difficult today, right? Not just COVID alone, during the whole last 3 years, if you were to look at, I think what brought teams together, what brought companies together is the fact that people were willing to stick together, right? For an FMCG organization like ours, while we would pride ourselves saying that we worked through the COVID period, what did working mean? Working means was not work from home for us. At least for a large part of our organization, it was about going back to the factory, going back to the research and development systems, going back to the field. We had around 2,000, 2,500 people who have to be on the field, right? And they had to service the market so that we could deliver our products. So while there was technology, while there was work from home and other stuff, you are entirely dependent on the passion and the energy and the selflessness of a set of people who had to be in the front end, delivering it for you. And I think that's the second big point I picked up passionately is I think people at the end of the day are becoming far more important today as much as they were before. I think the criticality of people today is far, far important, right? So I think that gets amplified at a macro level if you were to look at it from that perspective. The third part is a large part of the systems were dependent on globalization today, and we were all running behind saying, why don't we go behind a single vendor? I mean, just as an example, the supply chain systems are so tuned to just in time. The supply chain systems are so tuned to managing costs through negotiations at volumes level that at some point of time, you just realize that if that one vendor or that ecosystem of vendors just shut down, the entire ecosystem for the business shuts down. Yeah. We were awfully exposed. Not just FMCG industry, not just, I think, some of the companies, but at a large economy level, the globe was largely exposed to centralization of manufacturing in a particular set of geographies. And when those geographies get shut down, or when those geographies play truant, you don't have any other option. And then you go back to the drawing table to say, while yes, it's important to have scale, is it equally important to have local servicing available as a plan B or a backup? So that at least at points of issues like this, at times of challenges like this, do we have somebody that we can fall upon, right? And therefore, I think globalization in my mind has been completely turned on its table, heads on. My sense is that today, a lot of organizations today, while looking at supply chain, are equally looking at saying, do you have backups? Do we have alternatives? Do we have local support that can be done? So I think at a cost level, it is throwing challenges, but at the same time, you need to evaluate cost versus loss of business. And I think that is the third big thing that's happening. Supply chain systems are getting sort of completely remodified, or at least backups getting created so that we don't end up being in a situation where we're completely dry, right? The fourth angle that I would say is technology, right? And technology, I think, has got much amplified during these periods like never before. And I would particularly go back to COVID, not to the current situation, but towards COVID. I mean, a call like this, for example, we wouldn't have had much before, but today this is a norm, right? We are able to reach out to people. We're able to set up an ecosystem where it's work from home, it's virtual meetings. We're sort of getting used to virtual discussions. Technology, I think, has played a much large role. And I can very clearly see across industries, the adoption of technology across the companies, right from top to bottom, and ability of technology to disrupt some of the working processes. Right, I think that's the other thing that I would say. So these are four big macro themes in my mind that I've seen play out in the last 2 to 3 years. The other theme that is coming out very clearly today is it is important that we don't put all our eggs into one basket. I think that's the other thing that's coming out very clearly, because you never know what's going to happen with some of these, what you call as a VUCA world. And therefore, I think being very clear about alternatives, I think, is becoming important. So at a macro level, I think this is what it is. Leaving aside the economy. Economy, of course, is going through its own set of problems, first with COVID, then with the current situation of warfare. What it is also therefore putting on the table is very clearly, in a situation like that, how do you respond? How nimble and agile are you as an organization to respond to these situations, right? I think I would say, or my personal belief is the COVID taught us so much that probably the current situation of international warfare is still easier to handle than what COVID was probably, right? But I think the learnings that we picked up from there is something that's helped us. Massive learnings, I would say, when I talk to my friends in industry, talk to my colleagues, I think massive learnings that we've had across the spectrum. And hopefully that is here to stay. And some of these, I think many people have picked it up as permanent strategies rather than just leave it as a one-time change that has happened. Our supply chain systems, for example, we've completely revamped them basis our experiences of COVID. Our dependencies on single geographies or few geographies, we've sort of revisited today basis the learnings of the Ukraine warfare and the COVID situation again. So I think that's what is happening. At a micro level, of course, I think it is about the challenges continuing to happen, multiple challenges, multiple situations changing. How do you become very nimble? I think that's the way I would put it. Yeah.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Venki. I think it's a beautiful articulation of all the things that is happening in terms. I think the plan B was really a common theme that was going through the whole thing. Be it the supply chain disruption, that's calling for a plan B. All the things. So there's a lot of emphasis on plan B and also being agile and nimble. So I think that came very, very strongly with that one. Moving on to the next one. In 1959, JFK is said to have quoted something. Basically, what he said was, and I'm quoting his words, okay? He says, when written in Chinese language, crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger, and the other one represents opportunity. These are his words. But there are some counter things to that. Those who speak Mandarin, they say that actually it's not right. So in Mandarin, the word is basically called as Wei Ji. So the Wei stands for danger, so that's okay. But the Ji is not an opportunity per se, but it is more like they call it as a critical moment. So somehow it all makes sense. But the point here is that what is presenting itself as a problem or a challenge also creates an opportunity. So with that perspective, what are the few things that you see as opportunities? I know that you touched about being nimble, being agile and things like that, but anything more that you want to put on in terms of what opportunities do you see this creating for us?
See, I think despite all the gloom, despite all the challenges that it brought in, because the last 3 years have been different for different sets of industries and different sizes of companies. Some companies have been waiting over it. Some companies have not been able to do it. But I think I would pick up one area, which is about, like I said, technology adoption. The the pace at which technologies got adopted by industries today, I think we've leapfrogged at least 10 to 15 years. That's an opportunity that I see companies have seized as this pandemic happened or as these challenges are happening. Because I think very clearly the enablement of technology and therefore the ability to drive productivity harder and database decisions much faster at a leadership level. I think that's progressively a big opportunity that I personally see happening. And that's something that we've adopted in our company as well, very clearly. Otherwise, I see that the leap that we've done on technology adoption and technology, not just rolling out the technology, but getting it adopted across the organization, that I think has been far more faster during this period. And that I think is an opportunity that I would say, right? The other opportunity that I would say is linked back to that nimbleness that I said. For an organization of our size, and even for an organization of much bigger organizations, I would say, your ability to get people together and sort of figure out a model of working nimble, I think that's something that we have figured out as an opportunity today, I would say. As an example, for example, the earlier cycle of new product development for us is close to 12 months or 18 months, 24 months. Today, we have a prototype that we could probably do it in 3 to 4 months' time. Now, nothing has changed nothing has changed in the way we're doing it. But I think what has happened in this last 2 years is because of the constraints that we've been facing with, and the fact that you need to launch some of these products, we've actually found out workarounds which probably earlier we thought or we took it for granted. So when these workarounds come in today, you're able to crunch timelines. And therefore, I think that's an opportunity in my mind, if I were to look at. At a leadership level, if I were to look at many opportunities that I would say, one, I think it made leaders come closer to ground, vis-a-vis just sitting on ivory towers, right? And I think that's the big thing that I picked up in the last few years, because the last 12 months to 15 months, we've had everybody in the organization sit together and work together. There's nothing like, okay, you do it, I wait for you. There's no hierarchy. So the quantum of openness and the cultural transformation that we've been able to bring in some of these challenges have been some things that have worked for us better. So I do pray that such a pandemic never comes back again for the better of the world. And for a lot of us, it doesn't occur again. But I think some of the learnings that we pick up from here, both in terms of leadership, both in terms of organizational capabilities, I think these are opportunities that I see very clearly standing out. At an economy level, when you look at, e-commerce, for example, has never been much better than what it is in the country today. The quantum of e-commerce growth that is happening today probably would have taken us maybe 5 to 10 years more had this not happened, right? So I think what's essentially happening is some of the disruptions have found their foot during this period. And I think companies, organizations, leaders have been quick enough to sort of embrace them. And that, I think, is something that I see across very clearly. And I think that's the way I would look at it. I did see this happen. For example, we always pride, I've been in telecom for 20 years. I do pride myself saying that India actually leapfrogged the telecom wave directly from 2G to 4G, right? There's nothing called a 3G in between. There's nothing called broadband mobile. I mean, landline-based broadband was not there, but we just leapfrogged the mobile technology side. So in a way, I think some parts of the country today have leapfrogged during this COVID period. A lot of them have not been able to do it. Traditional industries have not been able to do it. SMEs have suffered a lot. I think they would bounce back over a period of time. And there, I think we need a lot more of macroeconomic interventions required, because the impact of these 2 years is not going to go away. But I think some of the opportunities that I felt were these, Vijay.
Thank you, Venki. I think this has been wonderful. So I think what I will also do is that for the people in the call, if you look at the chat box, I put a Mentimeter link for you. So I'm going to present the Mentimeter thing for you now. You should be able to, if you go to that site and put that code number, you would be able to see a question. Can you just confirm to me saying that you are able to see that question on your screens? Show of hands or some sort of emoji, please. Yes, okay, Satyendra is able to see it. All right. So basically, the question that we want to really ask is more about saying that, as coaches, we are known for asking some powerful questions. So here is what I was discussing with Vicky and tell him that, he has been generous enough to give us about 1 hour of his time for us. So I was telling him, saying that, for in return of whatever you are giving to us, why don't we give the sort of a flavor of business coaching and leadership coaching in this call? So if you look at the question that I put here, what powerful question would you raise to Venki if you are coaching for business results? Please keep your thing going on, and we are not going to address it now, but I will go ahead at the other rest of the conversations, and your questions can keep coming in. I will keep it open. So, Venki, now having talked about the business so far, allow me to explore a little on the leadership challenges. And I know that you touched about it a little over the past 3 years or 2 years, 3 years like that. Yeah? But then if you look at your own leadership journey during this period, what stands out in this?
What stands out? I think the first thing is you've never been humbled so much in life, right? I think this is one period that I'm sure every one of us would have got humbled enough. We would have had our own fears. I think life has never taught you to be so humble and the vagaries of leadership, right? So I think the big thing that I picked up is, I think it's about uncertainty and how do you face uncertainty, right? And when at leadership level you do that, just imagine what happens to the people below you, what happens to the large teams, the people who look up to you, right? So one big thing that I realized very clearly is that when uncertainty plays, and that can unsettle people, and therefore I think one of the big leadership lessons I've picked up in particular is that you would need to therefore look at your own people from the lens of their perspective, and therefore how do you actually fit yourself into their shoes in terms of, it is just not this situation alone. There are many uncertain situations that come in. I mean, from their perspective, from their personal perspective, there may be so many uncertain situations that come in. How do they deal with it? And how do you as a leader sort of connect with them to be able to bring that together, right? So I think that is one big lesson that I picked up, the connect with the people, and therefore being able to sort of, one, empathize with them. Two is be able to live their shoes and be able to sort of help them live. And I think that's something that I picked up as a big lesson. See, and the fact is that, like I said, it just got amplified for the fact that while you may be sitting in ivory towers, there is a set of people who are risking that whole, they were risking themselves and putting themselves in the front to be able to go and do the job that you wanted them to do. That was on the basis of either the commitment they had for the business or the commitment they had to you as a leader. I think that's one big point that I picked up during this period and got amplified is very clearly as a leader, how do you connect with people and how do you ensure that you see their perspective much more clearly? I think that's one big thing that got amplified to me during this period of time.
So it's connection, empathy. I think this is coming very, very strongly in what you're just saying, Venki. Now, we are all work in progress, even though, we are in different stages of our life, right? We are all work in progress. So if you try to distill everything, what would you say as one leadership challenge that you are working on now?
See, one leadership challenge that I'm working on, I would say, is the challenge of innovation, right? How do you, whether it is a startup or whether it is your own small organization or a professional organization of size, how do you actually sort of leverage the organization's capability to drive innovation, right? And particularly because of the challenges that are there and the way the whole world economic model is changing and the way markets are changing, how do you actually sort of get the organization's might to be able to drive innovation, right? Whether you're a startup or whether you're a big organization, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I think innovation is at the center of many successes today. That's one thing that I think from a business perspective, I would pick up where, how do you actually drive the organization? How do you build a culture of innovation? How do you build a culture in the organization that fosters innovation? I think that's one big agenda that I am currently faced with, that I'm driving with the organization.
Excellent. So, in a word, if I have to put in, you're talking about innovation from a self point of view and from a culture point of view or from a team point of view. Excellent. Good. Thank you very much. Okay, so there are some questions coming in. So I think what I will do is that, again, maybe I'm going into the next question now. So again, for the powerful question, if you are coaching Venki on his leadership journey now, what would be one powerful question that you would be asking? I'm going to change the screen from the earlier one to the next one. I hope it comes in. Let us see. Okay, are you able to see my screen now, which talks about what powerful question would you raise if you are coaching Venki on this specific leadership challenge, which is about innovation? Are you able to see that screen?
No.
No?
I'm not able to see.
No.
Oh, okay. Let me see what happens here. I changed it in my screen. Okay, so how does it work? Okay, let's do it this way. I'm going to type.
Vijay, you're
Sorry,
sharing
Rajni?
you're sharing your Mentimeter screen, right?
No, I'm not. I'm going to do it now. But I was thinking that it should show up on your screen so that you can write. But apparently, it is not happening. So I'm going to type the question here in the chat box. It talks about what powerful question would you ask Venki at this stage on his specific leadership challenge. And meanwhile, I will try to share my screen on the. All right, are you able to see my screen here?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I will go back the earlier screen. This is what we have got so far, Venki. So I think the things that are coming so far is that alignments of teams' response to leaders' vision and commitment. So that's a question type of thing that is coming in. So I think the probing is more about how do you make that happen? I think that's where the thing is coming in. Or profits the only yardstick. I think that's another one that is coming in. Resulted in people recasting themselves, resignations taking place, second jobs, choosing to work from home and not willing to go back. What can coaches help in such an environment? Okay. And what success formulas have served you well and you think will let you down? So maybe you can pick up one of these questions, Venki, whatever is most useful to you, and probably reflect on that.
Okay. I'll pick up the second one probably and go back to a couple of questions. See, success formula, I just have a simple word that have been sticking with me for the last couple of years, maybe decade or plus. I call it as Akal, Saral and Safal, right? Which is essentially about intelligence, simplicity, and that's my success formula that I would say. So when I look at it, I think as long as we're able to keep things simple and we are able to actually intelligently navigate around the opportunity, I think success, that's the success formula that I would say I've been holding personally, and I've been sort of pushing my teams, my friends, all of them. I think as long as we're able to keep it simple and focus very clearly in a very intelligent, sharp manner, I think the opportunity presents itself over time and success is a given. Many a time, I think what I've seen very clearly is we let loose or we lose sight of some of these things because we complicate it or we want to sort of make it a little more complicated and then lose sight of actually the core. And then the whole thing then starts steamrolling and we sort of deviate away from what the main goal is. So to me, I think the first thing that I always do with any opportunity or for that matter, when faced with any challenges, just step back to be able to look at it very clearly in a very simple lens and to look at the core of what is it that I'm looking at, right? And then probably apply logic and apply a bit of intelligence to it that it comes out by itself, and that for many a time it's actually helped me. And I think I would put it as simply Akal, Saral, Safal. That's been my simplistic formula that I've always been maintaining. I think it's stuck with me for the last probably 17, 18 years, ever since I've been handling leadership positions. So I think it's been a good, it's good with me for a long. Alignment of teams' response to leaders' vision and commitment, I think that is a given. It is very much necessary that the teams align to the leader's vision and commitment, because at the end of the day, otherwise, it would only be a single man's view or a single woman's view it does not get translated down the line. And like I said, whether you're a small organization or a large organization, at the end of the day, the energy gets transferred right across the organization from the top to the bottom. And one of the ways that I think we are very clear about it, and I think whether it's my experience with Airtel as an organization or with the startups that I mentor today, I think very clearly what's important is, one, of course, the leader needs to have a very clear vision, that is getting articulated very clearly, right? And the leader needs to have a story. One thing that's very important is that the vision needs to be translated into a story that is a believable story by people. And that story needs to get transferred to the people, which then gets the commitment from them and the energy from them. So in my mind, it's just not enough to have a strategy. It's just not enough to have, it's not just enough to have a vision in mind, but I think it's also equally important to have that vision translated to a story. The story translated into a simple understanding language that a large part of the organization can sort of resonate with, and therefore get in their energy and their buy-in. And that commitment that you get is what then drives the organization, right? Many new ideas, many organizations have failed when there has been a sort of lack of this transmission of vision throughout the organization. And I think that's one key area, which is why I said a period like COVID or a challenge like COVID has actually helped leaders cut across that. Otherwise, we would have always been assuming things. But I think this very clearly made it mandatory that, just as an example, for example, during this period, what we did is we just banished all sorts of channel communication. It said all 20, 30 people come together. So groups of 20, 30 people come together, direct communication. The direct communication gets understood by people. So one of the things I picked up from there is, the more you connect with people, the more you're able to tell your story passionately. And if that passion translates to the fellow colleagues and your teams as well, I think it's just a matter of success coming our way. So I would lay a lot of emphasis on aligning the teams to our vision as leaders and buying their commitment and our commitment to the team as well.
Excellent, excellent. So two things that have come so far. One is the MVP, minimum viable product, which you just talked about. The second one is storytelling. Anything else you want to pick up from here?
Are profits the only yardstick of business? No, I don't think so. Like we said, I think, see, profits are a byproduct of a very successful strategy that would be put in mind. So I very strongly believe, and I come from an ecosystem that very strongly believes that profit is an outcome, right? If I run behind profits, we're not going to get something great. I think what we go after is challenges that excite the teams. What we go after is challenges that sort of make us stretch ourselves. And by the way, when you're doing this business, you also make profits. I think that's the way we look at it. We don't look at it, and I personally don't subscribe to the fact that you put profit as a goal and then work backwards, because that limits your knowledge. And one thing I forgot, Vijay, is during this period, and over the last few years of these uncertainties, one thing that's been very clear is the power of the human mind has never been so much, the power of the human mind has never been exploited so much as it has been in the last few years, right? I think very clearly, if you were to harness the power of the human mind, that I think is the biggest thing that any leader or any company can do, because that drives wonders and that brings in a lot of opportunities and energies that you bring to the table. So to me, I think harnessing the power of the organization's mind, in terms of innovation, I think is a far more critical element and yardstick of business rather than looking at profits. Profits in my mind, top line and profits in my mind are an outcome of a certain exercise, which we call as, there is a vision, there is a strategy, there is a structure to that strategy. That strategy then gets executed through people. People get enabled by processes. If I follow this framework, I think the output of this framework would probably be the success that we define as either top line or profitability. But our focus is more on these 5 elements. What's your vision? What's your strategy? What's the structure? What's the process that you're putting on the table? And how are you energizing people? If I were to get these 5 elements right, I get my success right. Now, success could be defined as market share, top line, profitability, whichever it is.
Yeah, perfect, excellent, good. Yeah, maybe you want to, just the last one on this one, Venki. If you want to pick up something non-negotiable beyond the business result, what would that be?
See,
Other than revenue and growth?
Yeah, one non-negotiable business results for us is, are you future-proofing yourself? In a world of today's uncertain nature, are you still, as a business, dependent on something that you created 20 years ago? While it may still give you the growth, are you still dependent on that? Or are you future-proofing yourself? Future-proofing, I think, is a big, future-proofing is a big aspect of business that I think most of us look at from a perspective of growth. And that probably over a period of time would guarantee you growth.
Yeah. I think otherwise we risk becoming a dinosaur. So that's what it says very clearly. Yeah, perfect. Maybe I'll move on to the next screen and see if there is anything there. How do I go now?
It's not going for us, so.
Yeah, it's not going all right. Okay, so yeah, I think that is basically the. Okay, I think that is what I had as a question from the panel, from the coaches. So maybe one last question before we close, Venki. We talked about your personal leadership so far, but if you also look at your team's journey during this turbulence, and also looking at the future, you talked about how things are changing, how the technology is changing, and how the landscape is changing also. What are a couple of leadership attributes that you see that would be needed for the emerging future for us to thrive?
Couple of points that come to my mind. One, like I said, is humility is, I think, the first one that I would bring to the table. I think leadership attributes at whatever level, humility, I think, stands out first. And that's a virtue, I would say, that it's far, far critical, and it gets emphasized time and again. Yeah. The second fact that I would say is openness, right? When I say openness, it is about openness to be able to learn new things, openness to be able to learn new technologies, adapt yourself to new avenues of learning that's coming in. Because that openness is what will probably help leaders scale, help teammates scale up faster on new opportunities. Because some of the opportunities that are coming in today are not traditional opportunities. Whether you look at it from a career perspective or you look at it from a business perspective, I think openness is, I think, the second thing that I would say is an important aspect of leadership quality that I would say that all of us should have across the spectrum. The third is, I think, willingness to stretch, right? These are times when it is not about being in your own comfort zone. I think it's an ability to be able to step out of the comfort zone and be able to look at things with a new perspective. I think that's the third piece that I would pick up, and that's something that I keep as an advice for myself and for my team as well. Step out of the comfort zone, right? Because that's very critical, because that is what would probably help us to be able to learn new things faster and experiment a lot more faster. In the absence of that, we probably would, like you said, become a dinosaur at some point of time, right? So I think, therefore, I would say humility, openness, and step out of the comfort zone. The fourth piece that I would say is be flexible. Don't be rigid, because there's nothing that is constant in this world. Change is only the constant factor in the world. So being flexible is an important aspect of leadership in my mind. I would call out these four top of the mind. Many other things, but I think I would call out these four as top of the mind.
Perfect. Thanks, Venki. Thanks for sharing this one. I'm making a guess that these are the ones that are going to shape the culture also as you go forward. So that's what it looks like. Yeah, good. Thanks. I think we are running. We actually overshot the time. So maybe one last question, and then we'll close it. Okay. I think there's one question that came in from Professor KK. He talks about what has been the significant learnings for your team as told by them.
Yeah. So I think one thing that, like I said, one thing that the teams have appreciated very clearly is to think out of the box, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're faced with a constraint that you've never imagined that is going to happen immediately, and you're facing a constraint like that, the only way that you're able to sort of navigate that situation is when you think out of the box, right? I think that is one thing. Thinking out of the box or forcing yourself to think out of the box is something that I think all of us as employees and the entire group has been able to sort of appreciate during this period of time. The second one, like I said, is appreciate your colleagues. It's just not the expectation of leadership alone to appreciate, but I think appreciating your colleague, a small pat on the back. Now, these are things that you would have seen as more as culture building exercises over the last, I mean, all of us have been prescribing this, coaches have been prescribing this, but these are things that you would have seen as felt good factors or feel good factors, right? But actually today, appreciation is a very important part of the entire game plan today, where I see not just myself, not my team leaders, but each other. The cross-functional teams appreciate each other far more openly, and they don't see this as a gimmick. See, there used to be times when you see appreciation as a gimmick, but that's not the case today. Genuinely, people believe that appreciation is a way of life, because in those hard times, there was nothing else but appreciation that you could give to each other, just hoping that things will go away, right? And you had to still work together, you had to get things done. So an appreciation and appreciating each other's work, respecting each other's work, I think clearly. The fourth thing that came out personally for many people was the comfort zone, because many people were far more entrenched in their own comfort zone, but that's something that they have sort of worked out. So I think these are a few things that I picked up from the teams. It is also a period of time when employees realize that the men are getting separated from the boys. Sorry for being gender biased, but I guess the men getting separated from the boys was also happening during that period of time, because very clearly people who are able to step up during this period were able to actually be seen in a very different light by the entire organization, right? Now that's something that employees have come back and said, listen, when there is a crisis, that is when probably new leaders emerge. And therefore, from an employee perspective, from team leads perspective, crisis is an opportunity that you seek, right? And ensure that you step up. You don't need to do it artificially, but genuinely when you step up. So we've seen a lot of people in those 2 years, we've actually seen a lot of people, how they respond to situations. Some of them have been picked up as futuristic leaders by the simple fact that they demonstrated that which they wouldn't have probably demonstrated in a normal period of time. So I think these are some things that employees have been reflecting back with us. We've been sort of using this as agendas with them to sort of help them coach themselves better, sort of pick those things as nuances that they need to pick up as they move forward.
Perfect. Yeah, and I stand corrected. I was sort of confused with my time zone and there. It's actually not even 1 hour yet, so we still have time. So which means we have more opportunities for some question. I think there's another question which is coming from Suresh here. So it says, given the uncertainty in the business environment, what are some of the talent development initiatives you have taken over the last 2 years, and what has paid off?
Okay. I think what we've accelerated, let me start with what we've accelerated. What we have very clearly accelerated is identifying key talent, right? Because at the end of the day, while we do look at the entire universe of the team members, I think there are a few critical talent that throws up from time to time, and an ability to hold on to this talent. And couple this with the question that somebody had asked on, what do you do when people resign? Because in today's scenario, great resignation is a way of life, right? I think the only way that we've seen is that as long as, and the way I've seen it throughout, and when I step back and look at how did I actually stay in an organization for 15 years, right? My previous stint was close to 15 years, which I think even by the logic of 90s kids, it's still a little bit of an anomaly, right? I think the fact is, when you go back to the table and look at it, I think it is about identifying critical talent and one, engaging the talent, two, having a conversation with them to be very clearly able to sort of articulate what you have in mind for them and what they have in mind for you, right? That possibly is what is the sort of interactions that we have picked up with the teams today. So critical talent management is one thing that we have picked up from a team perspective, and that's of very critical importance that we picked up as an organization in these periods of time. The other one that we've done very clearly is our articulation of expectations have been very clear and stringent even today, far more than what it was in the past. Because of so much of uncertainty on ground, there is always this nagging feeling with employees, what happens if I don't perform? What happens if situation is not so good that I can't perform? Would I get penalized, right? Anxiety of this is actually creating sometimes the problem of resignation, because they themselves start benchmarking with their own performances, and at some level they start getting a little more jittery. So what we have done is very clearly, we've started articulating very clear goals to people, right? And those goals are very clearly articulated and sort of cascaded down with them much more frequently. Second is the review of those goals and the performances are far more stringent today and far more frequent than just an annual appraisal. Across the organization, we've tested with a lot more frequent appraisals and frequent feedback, as we call it. We are embracing that culture far more faster so that people are at least clear in their minds as to where they stand. See, what's more important in today's scenario is not just what the organization thinks about the employee, it's even more important what the employee thinks about themselves with respect to the organization, right?
Yeah.
When that clarity is there with people, I think far more stickiness happens, far more assertiveness of the employee happens, and therefore some of the resignation of this nature can be avoided. Right? And I firmly believe that this is one of the formulas that need to be done. I've seen this work with me personally, so I do believe that this is something that we will also be able to do it across. I think these are two big things that we would have picked up from a team perspective. The third thing that we have done is we've deployed a lot more employee connect programs, town halls more frequently, connecting leaders with the employees, having far more open conversations with them. So, and virtual formats, for example, we hold virtual town halls every quarter. One of the unintended benefits of the virtual town hall, while I have my own reservations on it, is people are less hesitant to ask you questions anonymously, right? While I don't subscribe to the anonymity part of it, and I don't believe in anonymity because that means that they don't trust in my openness as a leader. But then I think it's a given. But at least what happens is these town halls virtually are helping us get questions that probably people would have not been able to ask you physically or personally. But today, a lot of questions get asked to us on these virtual town halls. It gets addressed to the CEO, it gets addressed to the chairman, to the leaders. So I think what it is also doing is it sorts of clarifies a lot of positions of leadership to people. I think that's the big thing that's happening today from a team perspective.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So a lot of communications happening, clarity coming in, all these things are coming in a very nice way. More specific focus, Venki, on the L&D space. What specific initiatives are you taking to help the organization to move to the future?
So we look at L&D. I look at L&D from three perspectives. Right. One perspective is, like I said, L&D feeds into the strategy of the organization in terms of enabling the capability of the organization, driving the capability of the organization. Right. So two themes that we have in our organization today, and most businesses have today, is enhancing the digital capability of the organization in totality. How do you actually make the organization or transform the organization into a digitally led organization? And how do you build capabilities for that? Right? I think that's one thing that we picked up. The second big thing that we picked up, like I said, is innovation. How does L&D play a role in nurturing creativity for and innovation for the organization at large? I think that's from a perspective of, if I look at it from the perspective of the company. If I look at it from the perspective of leadership, L&D plays a large role for us in terms of grooming leaders for us, identifying gaps, identifying the strengths and weaknesses, and grooming those leaders from a futuristic perspective, not necessarily with the current role alone, but ability to therefore be able to pick up a few leaders and transform them to be able to take on larger roles, take on larger mantles as we move forward, right? I think that's the second piece of it that we look at. The third piece of it that we look at from an L&D perspective is very clearly, as an organization, since we are so focused on goals, clarity of goals, and execution of goals, what role does L&D play in execution excellence for us, right? How do I excel in execution as an organization? And that is a big differentiator for many organizations today, right? There are many legacy organizations that have not just grown from brand perspective, but simply put, their differentiation vis-a-vis the market is the capability to execute much more sharply. So execution excellence as a third leg is where we focus on L&D, right? And say, what role does L&D play from an execution excellence perspective? And combine these three together, I think that's the mandate that we've sort of given to the L&D team. That's a sort of mandate that we picked up as an L&D organizational requirement. Look at it from a organization perspective, look at it from a leadership perspective, look at it from an ability of the organization to execute it much more sharply. I think these are three areas that we have picked up from an L&D perspective.
Beautiful, beautiful. So it's more about the innovation part of it, then the digital leadership that is coming in, and of course, operational excellence or execution excellence that is also coming in very, very, very strongly here. So yeah, great. Yeah, so let me also see if there is any other thing that is there on the Mentimeter.
I missed one more, Vijay. The other part that we focus on, and that's a very pet topic that CKR talks about, and I think it comes from his personal experience, is about enabling yourself as an individual for the future. Right. So while I talk about what the organization wants, I think we also emphasize with every employee what is in it that you want to do for future, and therefore how are you grooming yourself for the future. So if an employee for that matter comes to us and says, listen, this might not be an organizational priority, but I think this is my personal priority. As long as it's not completely deviant from what we do, we actually encourage people to take that up. We've seen many people come back and say, okay, let me go back to executive education. Let me sort of go back to picking this specific area of focus, right? What we call it is invest in yourself. I mean, ability to invest in yourself so that you are future-proofing yourself, not just the organization alone. I think that's the other area that we picked up. And that's a slightly tangential mantle that we've also picked up as part of our learning and development organization.
Excellent, excellent. So I think that's a very strong message that is coming in terms of what excites you, how are you future-proofing yourself, and if that happens, then from it's an inside-out game, wherein if you're future-proofing yourself, automatically the business also gets future-proof. So I see a lot of coherence that is happening here. So fantastic. So I think those are the questions that we had from the thing. So we'll open to the floor now. We've got 5 more minutes. So anyone wants to have a question with Venki, please unmute yourself and we can go for it. Sangeeta, anybody can unmute, right? If they want.
Yes, they can.
Can I ask a question? I'm KK.
Yeah, please go ahead, KK.
Yeah, hi Venki. It has been a great interactive session. One question that I have is, you are in a highly competitive business. How do you think you have performed vis-a-vis your leaders, rather your competitors, during these difficult times, or was there anything that you had to learn from them?
I think, we definitely picked up a lot of learnings. I think when we look at the last 2 to 3 years, I think I can be quite confident and proud. I think CavinKare as an organization has sort of, like I said, has been able to wade through this COVID situation much more better than most of our other industry colleagues have done, right? It's a combination of our product portfolio. It's a combination of how nimble we were to be able to execute our plans quickly in the market, sort of ramp up those opportunities and get those opportunities going. So at an organization level, I think we've performed well, and we've sort of come out unscathed in terms, if not much better, in terms of the challenges that we've had in the last 2 to 3 years, right? Both at the leadership level as well as in terms of the business performances as well. However, there's a lot of learnings that we picked up. I think we picked up a lot of learnings from our competitors as well. Now, there have been companies which are double the size of us, much bigger than us. Their responses to the situation has been equally eye-opening for us, right? We picked up those learnings. We picked up a lot of learnings from the startups. I mean, the way the startups have responded to these situations, right? So I think our learnings have come from multiple areas across the spectrum. We've also been able to sort of crystallize our own success factors as well and sort of make them as learnings for the subsequent years as well. So I think overall, like I said, it has been a sort of learning curve that's been very steep for us. When we step back and look at it, I think it is a journey that we think we've been able to do it far more successfully. And I think it's a learning that we would pick up with all humility. We would pick it up and go. But the only thing is, we pray that it personally doesn't happen to anybody out of the globe. I think that, I would say, despite all this, it is just not worth it.
That's correct. Yeah. We got a question from Sujata. Sujata, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. I know it has been a very tough and a challenging journey for you. During this journey, what kind of supports did you use? Did you have a sounding board or somebody whom you could, rely on as a mentor, or what helped you to go through this journey personally? I mean, there's a lot of emotional content in this journey as you go along. So, what helped you to ease that content?
Yeah, I would say, see, it's been like what? So it's been what I came into this industry in 2018. Unfortunately, of the 4 years completed, fifth year running. Of the 4 years, 3 years have been with COVID, right? And then the rest of the ones have been. So it's been tough that way. See, like you said, I think the way I look at, of course, I have a great mentor in CKR. I think I would, yeah, he's been a great mentor. He's been a great leader who gives you space, right, to make mistakes, to be sort of able to quick. But the other thing is, as much as the space is given, there's also this feedback given quickly for you to correct as well. So I think it's important in times of those that you need to give feedback to people so that in case there are corrections to be done, you do it better, right? So one thing is I've had a great sort of a in-house mentor. I've had a great leader as a boss. I think that's been helping me sort of scale up to this challenge in a new environment for me, literally. The second thing, like you said, is I have my sounding boards. I mean, I have my sounding boards from my past experience in my other industry, other industry colleagues, as well as one. We keep talking, we sort of exchange notes. The third thing, of course, that's good that's happened with this industry in particular is I think it's an industry that sort of crisscrosses. So we've had our own set of people who we talk to each other. While we may not share business ideas, I think leadership challenges have been sort of exchanged, whether it's in the FMCG summit forums or otherwise as well. But I think what's important is I go back to a learning that one of my mentors gave me. See, what's important is for you to reach out, right? And I think that's a big learning that I picked up in life. When you reach out to somebody with the help, that person takes it as his or her personal responsibility. So your success becomes their success.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest learning for me is that when in trouble, please reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out. Don't have egos around that. Please reach out. So I have my set of people whom I openly reach out, who I'm comfortable with accepting that, yeah, possibly I'm not able to understand it better. I'm failing in this area. So help me out. What I find very clearly is when you reach out like that, your success becomes their success. And I've seen some of my friends who after 6 months come back to me and ask me, listen, you asked about a problem 6 months ago. We did speak about it. Have you actually overcome that today? Now, they are actually tracking that and coming back to me saying, boss, have you sort of addressed this? So I think the biggest thing that I pass on to my people, what I say is, when in stress, when you need advice, please be less egoistic. Just go out, ask for advice, ask for help. People will help out. And I think things will flow. So I think that's the way I would put it.
Thank you. I think that was wonderful, actually.
TV, you have a question?
Hi. This is a thank you, Venki, for a very, very lucid, and it's not an easy conversation. And you have fielded, different questions very, very well. I'm going to ask you a very to the book question in terms of what we do as coaching. What's the coaching culture in CavinKare? And during this pandemic, have you actually increased the number of coaches, or you felt now is not the time and hence it went down? What has been the general coaching culture?
See, like I said, I think if I were to be very frank with you, I think, we've had our internal focus on the investing in yourself as a program, looking at people that way. But realistically, I think we've had so much of challenges and we've had so much of internal preoccupied challenges that we've had that we've not sought external help too much so far, right? I think that's a shortcoming from our side, and that's something that we will sort of correct as we move forward. Because it was in a period when there were so many things to be done and so many moving parts were together that I think we were focusing more on what we felt is sharp enough to be executed right now. While it is not definitely tactical, it did have a view of what we need to do, but I think we could do far more better. And one of the things that I've called out as a strategy very clearly is accelerated learning, right? If I have to be strong on innovation, I have to be strong on execution excellence, I have to be strong on growth. There is an accelerated learning that is required, and the accelerated learning can come internally, can come with external help. So as an organization, I think we are opening up to more of external help and external learning help. Have we done that to our satisfaction? No. There have been challenges. We've got so many preoccupations ourselves that we probably have not been able to sort of jump over that. But I think we picked it up as a very clear area of focus that we need to bring in, right? What we are very clear is there are areas that we can do it ourselves better, but there are areas that we need to pick up from external help, and that's something that we would look forward to. So I wouldn't say we've engaged too many coaches so far. Attempts have been made, but we've not been able to sort of do that. But what we're very clear is we know all syndrome is not that something that we want to get stuck with, and probably over a period of time, or maybe the next 2 years, 3 years, we would see a lot more engagements happening. We have started that in the tech space, but on the leadership space, on the performance spaces, we yet to get into that fully, but we would in our minds.
Thank you so much for the very, very candid reply. And I think you have been very, very, honest about it. And I will put forth my invitation for you to, engage with CFI. And if it's okay, we'll drop by, say hello, have a cup of coffee and see if we can help.
Sure.
Yeah, Suresh, I think we should take this forward without
Suresh
delay.
is out.
Oh,
Suresh
Suresh is out.
he's got something, so he dropped off.
Anyway, I think Vijay,
it's a
you
good
and I are
conversation.
part of that domain.
Yeah.
So let's kind of leverage that. Yeah,
Sure.
wonderful. And fantastic. Incidentally, on an aside, a small trivia. My daughter was an executive assistant with CKR in 2010, I think, for about 3 years.
Yeah.
So I know CKR well, and please convey my best to him.
Sure.
The name is T. Venkatraman. And daughter's name is Shruti Venkatraman. So he'll probably remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
4 minutes past. So I think probably we have. Thank you, Venki, for taking all the questions and wonderful, sharing of experience and the thoughts also. So I think it's a very enriching conversation that we had. Thank you very much for all the things that you did for us. And 5 minutes over the time that is there, but I think we are there. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. All the best.
Bye.
Thanks, yeah, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.